Hello, this is Dr. Nuke, and right now I wish to talk to you about global warming and climate change, which is a big, hot topic, no pun intended, today. The idea has been around for a long time. The Swedish scientist Svante Arrhenius, back in the late 19th century, came up with the idea that carbon dioxide being put into the atmosphere by burning coal, that was the principal fossil fuel then, would add enough to the atmosphere to increase significantly the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and he's correctly calculated that it would warm the earth, although he thought it would take place on a much longer time scale and than what we're experiencing now, and he regarded it as a beneficial thing. For him, being from Sweden, he thought that if Sweden warmed up a little bit, it would be good for Sweden, grow more crops, etc. But that has been around a long time, but more recently it has become a big topic, and the thing that a great many people are concerned with. The reality is the Earth's temperature is warming. It's warmed up a little bit already, and projections are for it to continue to increase in temperature, causing wild weather events, and big storms and so on, as well as sea level rise caused by two things: thermal expansion of the seawater as it gets warmer, and addition of water to the seas by melt from glaciers. And Greenland is collapsing faster than what scientists had predicted not too long ago. So we may see significant sea level rise by the end of the century. And there's sections of Antarctica that are unstable as well. So we could have very significant sea level rise by the end of the century, which could be catastrophic for countries like Bangladesh, which has a large proportion of its population living at a very, very low elevation above sea level. The United States would be hit hard too by sea level rise, because we have settlement along the barrier islands that go all the way up and down the East Coast and the Gulf Coast. So we'd have severe coastal erosion there, and likely the loss of habitability of some areas in those barrier islands, as well as areas like the Everglades and parts of South Florida. It is a serious problem. If all the ice melted in Greenland, Antarctica, everywhere, sea level would rise by maybe 240 feet, which would be, of course, absolutely catastrophic. Even in a worst case scenario, it would take a fair amount of time for all the ice to melt, but we need to be thinking in terms of limiting the rise in the Earth's temperature, and if possible, preventing total collapse of the glaciers, and maintaining general habitability of the planet and the planet's ability to sustain an increasing human population. Yes, the human population just passed the 8 billion mark, and we're on track to reach 11 billion or so by the end of the century. Well, what to do about it? Well, we certainly need to, as rapidly as possible, convert to renewable energy, stop burning fossil fuels as soon as possible, especially coal. So, wind and solar, we need to invest big in wind and solar, and continue with hydropower. And I don't advocate necessarily nuclear fission, but we certainly should work on developing nuclear fusion power, and when it becomes available, utilize it to the greatest practical degree. There is a lot of research being done on developing fusion. There's private enterprise working on it, and then there's the big government projects where progress has recently been made. The National Ignition Facility at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratories, they recently reached ignition in a deuterium-tritium pellet. We need to think of conservation of energy as well as producing it in a green manner. Efficiency, sustainable agriculture, all this stuff ties in together with it. Then there's regenerative agriculture, agricultural practices that take carbon out of the atmosphere and build it up into the soil. There's even concrete that takes carbon out instead of being a net source of carbon. The concrete industry does release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. It's not just carbon dioxide. Of course, there's other greenhouse gases like methane, which is even a more potent greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide, and even more potent still are the chlorofluorocarbons or fluorocarbons. Those are very potent greenhouse gases, and we must make it a high priority to, as quickly as possible, curtail the release of those into the atmosphere. Especially because they're very long-lived in the atmosphere. And we need to think also in terms of planetary engineering. Yes, that is engineering on a planetary scale to deliberately affect climate. If global warming is making the Earth too warm, then we need to do things to cool down the Earth, such as releasing aerosols of sulfate particles in the stratosphere to cool down the planet. Also, there are rocks from rock outcroppings, mantle rocks, in such places as Oman. Oman is a country in the Arabian Peninsula. Well, these rocks could be used to take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and sequester it. There's enough of these rocks in various places on Earth to take 1 trillion tons of carbon out of the atmosphere. That's as much as was put into it by all the Industrial Revolution. So that could help too if we made use of that. And there's other technical fixes as well that might be employed. We need to take everything that we have at our disposal and use it to save the Earth. Ultimately, we also need to pray to God, apologize to God for the mess we've made of our planet, and ask Him for His help in fixing things. And, of course, in general, submit ourselves to God and His holy will and pray for His guidance for our lives, and ask Him for forgiveness for our sins, and accept His mercy and love. Well, global warming, climate change is certainly a big issue. We need to focus on addressing it effectively for the sake of our planet, for the sake of our futures, for the sake of the futures of our children and grandchildren and their descendants. Well, this is, please like, share, subscribe, comment. This is Dr. Nuke signing off.